Which stick to choose? Which to choose?
Hey, it's still on!
Right after the space trucking game released, Elite Dangerous developers started gearing up for the next big thing, and that big thing was none other than the Horizon Season Pass. With relative amateurish streams and videos, they announced that with this paid season, you would be getting planetary landings on launch and all other updates as they come along through Horizon's completion. Frankly speaking, the hype was there. Actually being able to land on those planets, those thousands of millions of planets that the game's sandbox offer, was a technical challenge like no other. And if you had told me that this was Elite Dangerous back in early 2010s, I would not believe it. Yet there were other aspects of the season that made it quite unforgettable, as it changed the game like no other. In fact, with Horizons, one could argue Elite became a whole different beast. And people? Well, Horizons launch actually drew in more players than the initial launch of the game, which to my knowledge only a handful of games have achieved in their lifetimes. So, what did Elite Dangerous get from the season pass that was so revolutionary and eye-catching? Well, obviously we can start with the launch and the first update, the planetary landings. Not only you were able to traverse the galaxy of over 400 billion systems, but on approximately 50% of the celestial spheres you were able to actually land with this update. And on top of it all, planets were procedurally generated, clearly, otherwise it would take inhuman amounts of space to store it all. So being generated from a seed value, they were not just once generated and tossed away. No, you could return to the same spot, and aside from planet movement, which was part of the game already, you'd be able to find the same place, same space through coordinate system, and it would look exactly the same. Technically, this is taking procedural generation in games to a whole new level. On top, you'd be able to meet up with friends on planets too, and of course use the new vehicle as well to have a, well, intimate experience. Okay, so can I take a side and praise the developers who coded SRV physics and say, this is one of the best suspension simulations I know, so thank you. And sure, inter-object collision with some prefabs was a big issue, but surprisingly it never bothered me. Planetech as well as the SRV was a beast of an update. Sometimes you could even find some very unique planets with generation artifacts or simply outlandish results. And that kinda thrusted explorers in the crotch pretty hard. And to this day, rightfully, the holy grail for explorers is to find a Great Canyon planet or some really interesting anomaly, which rightfully they hunt for. Then the second update, which actually put meaning on driving on planets and being there from the typical gameplay perspective, the Engineers. Basically an upgrade system for your ship modules and items to a level that no two ships ever were equally upgraded. Now this system was reworked to a more fairer version, but the point is, it is a system that simply exploded unique ship builds and offered unparalleled customization for your already quite customizable ships. Another pretty nifty idea and feature was multicrew. To get a digital version of your friend to come aboard your ship to sit in one of the empty seats and potentially use weapons or that deployable fighter for some co-op type gameplay, or simply sit there and explore with you as you both look at things. That's an idea, it was a pretty good one. Finally, there would be a bit more intimate group groping your girthy gadget as you finally would feel like not the only soul aboard this space dump truck. So, would you take Aisling Duval up the ass, or would you rather go with Arisa Duval and Torvald threesome? And hey, you guy, what would you pick?
What? And so, in summary, due to economic considerations, it's best to go for the threesome, as later down the line, not only you will be able to keep your slaves, but also commit mass genocide on scale unprecedented, but also you'll have some blackmail material for imperial standing.
And a few smaller additions were new ships, including those new fighter drone-like mini things, some new station types, as well as looks for existing ones, passenger as well as planetary-based missions were too added, which surprisingly later became one of the better money makers.
The person who invented this industry will rue the day they took it to space! Shut up, or I'll sell you all as slaves!
Now, and speaking of that, they also introduced the largest ship by hitbox, the Beluga Liner, which is the top 1% of the most hated things we know.
Commander, make sure to make way for bigger ships.
Bitch, I am the bigger ship!
And of course, some story also was injected with discoveries of a completely new alien race called Guardians, where people discovered leftover ruins, sparking a few questions of what happened to the old alien threat that the players knew from the previous games, the Targoids.
Oh, don't mind me, I'm just desecrating and literally teabagging an extinct alien race. Get good at living, losers!
Well, later on, Targoids themselves appeared in probably most spectacular scripted but still amazing mini-scene. Oh god, to this day this is one of the single most amazing moments in the game that actually made me want to learn about the lore, the sound, the visuals, the urge, perfectly encapsulated what Elite was. From all of this, it sounds like developers basically both fleshed out the game and added new stuff to it, which, yeah, I guess is an apt description. Though, let's not forget that this took 2 years to be fully delivered. It was, after all, a season pass.
Funny, the Frontier tends to stay away from the term season pass in marketing for Horizons. Even back in the day, they realized that it was a bad idea. But hey, we gotta see it through.
Well, this is basically a euphemism for Horizons. Well, hey, I'm an artist. Generally speaking, season passes in games are often used to interactively reward players for playing the game. The more you play, the more goodies you unlock. If you pay money, you unlock an extra tier where more goodies reside. But you still need to play to unlock shit. Basically, it's a live service scheme to force people to grind the game, even if you paid for it, instead of simply buying XP boosters and cosmetics as you normally would. It's an interactive sunk cost simulator. However, when it comes to game updates in the form of season passes, well, it's a bit different. A developer comes on stage and tells you they will be releasing this expansion for a game.
Alright, so we know expansions, big updates that use the base game to build upon. It's usually slightly smaller in the size of a new game, both in content, story, and features. Now, we had an innovative idea. What if we make only a small part of it, then sell it at a full expansion price, and promise to deliver all other parts later?
But can you tell us what will be in this expansion?
Maybe what they will tell you? Now buy it!
Basically, for Horizon, all we knew before its release was that we would only get the few things we got in the first and the second update. Most other things were very vague, and more so, the delivery time for these things was also very vague. To simply put, season passes are pre-ordering undisclosed updates for undisclosed time. Basically, you're buying a fucking hope that the developers actually will be able to deliver something, while usually not even knowing what that something is, even in a conceptual phase. For all intentions and purposes, it could be just 5 small updates fixing the bugs of the first initial sales pitch. Or worse, developers can just simply take the money and run away and still be off the hook, because they did not promise anything and thus not obligated to deliver anything. On the bright side, yes, sure, you giving developer money so that they continue development of the game early is more financially securing for them. However, Elite Dangerous never needed this. Just look at their public yearly financial reports. Issues with these season passes and a few other things are the developers often phone in their performances, as most humans do, especially if they're not pressured to release a proper roadmap and are not kept on a tight leash. Regardless of that, season passes are a good way to make these people playing this live service game to be continuously interested in the product, because once you have bought in, customers usually try to justify their purchase. You know, the sunk cost fallacy. You already spent a good amount of money for this very subpar product, and the only thing keeping you positive is the promise that it will get better.
Why do you suddenly smell crowdfunding? And America? And JPEGs?
So the more you string along your customers and consumers with the promises of realized value, the better chances of them in the meantime to keep up with the news, buy into cosmetics and microtransactions, let alone the next season or DLC or expansion.
Since today we're examining Horizons and we talked about season passes, well, I did go back and look through the sales pitch of this poorly thought out and abusive marketing exercise.
After going over some old videos of Horizons before it's launched, I've found some interesting tidbits. However, it's important to note, Frontier, a company selling this promise of Horizons, never explicitly told its customers what they were planning to deliver in this season in a simple, easy to digest way. So right off the bat, this had a stink of a crusted old mayonnaise sandwich.
Oh, okay, yes,
I think
yes,
you
yes.
have to answer the first
Right,
one.
okay, so that's the first one. So yes, it will. And I've actually today playing it again on
So
on Vive.
here's what the people knew from the initial sales pitch. We would be getting planetary landings and this SRV new vehicle to drive on these planets. After skimming through some other streams, they also explained that we would be getting engineering was mentioned as the gameplay portion for these new maps, and there were some mentions of passenger missions totally sprinkled in. And finally, the only other things that I found confirmed was multi-crew, holomies, and potential promise for Targoids. Of course, I could have missed a few other little things, but this is what I found confirmed only. And the fact that not only they deliberately hid away crucial info on what they planned to deliver, but also that there was no explainer or detailed description, just speaks to me as deliberately misleading, falsely advertised whether or not they wanted it or not. Now, I get it, that releasing a roadmap is actually very bad for development, as most software development is not as simple to predict. You may get stuck on some really minor issues forever. More than anything, I have actually experienced this on my own videos. Fuck, this series alone. However, let's not forget that it's not the job of the customer to give a flying cunt muffin to care about that. You put out a pre-order update expansion. You better back up the value in a clear and honest way to your customers. But they chose not to.
Oh, and I found rather hilarious snippets that you may find also rather amusing.
What types of SLV will be released over the course of Season 2? And don't worry if you can't say anything.
So I think the I don't know offhand. The first variants will actually be quite similar to the SRV, but just variants of it, and there will be others to come down the line.
That's really cool. Will they, as far as you imagine, I don't want to go into too much detail if I can't, but will they just handle differently and things like that rather than... look complete?
Details to be sorted and also do different things.
Great.
Oh, and I found this too!
When will we see asteroid stations?
Well, you can sort of see the first vestiges of them if you play CQC. But I know that's not the answer you're looking for. They will come. We don't have a time for them. They're currently hoping to do them at the back end of Season 2, but it's not definite on the plan.
And then I found this too!
Any new content relating to the Thargoids? I think we kind of touched on that before. So we'll
yeah, okay. No, I don't want to spoil it. There are things related to the Thargoids coming in Season 2.
Great.
Funny that in LaveCon 2019, developers avoided commenting on questions about SRVs. Seems that Braven's employees lack the knowledge about his product that he has. Curious that.
You know, I find it quite interesting hearing them say Season 2. To me, this speaks that beyond Horizon's initial updates, even before Horizons was launched, internally they were already planning to sell multiple seasons. The fact that we got Targoids at the end of Horizons clearly shows that they, and let me quote one particular developer from the team, reprioritized the things and scrapped the whole season pass idea. Boy, was Frontier drinking industry Kool-Aid back in the day. I only wonder how much more exploitative did they want to actually go with this. However, an alternative option I've heard was that they didn't really know what they were doing with Horizons, and it was the marketing that forced the whole season pass and multiple seasons shtick onto the project. And frankly, I'm inclined to agree. It often is the marketing that ruins a good thing. This was most likely one of such cases. It's kind of funny that Frontier as a company doesn't even know what seasons mean from the looks of things. 2 years is certainly not what we commonly would think as a season, but then again, the whole industry uses this word these days so frequently, we could use this old meme.
But hey, fine, they scrapped the seasons and combined what they had. They still could have done or delivered something really good. I mean, you said it yourself somewhere.
Ah, yes, sure, possibility exists. However, the constant whiff of minimum viable product or minimum passable crap was in the air. And we'll get to that in just a bit. But you know, in my time, I've heard a few things through the walls, or grapevine, or sometimes in the first-hand experiences. Now, I of course have to preface this as pure rumor. So, Space Legs, the thing, or at least its predecessor, was supposed to be the last update of Horizons, until internal shuffling, presumably back when they realized that the seasonal season crap was not going to work out. Also, from some leaks in the past, we know that building on planets, like in No Man's Sky for example, was presumably a planned feature too. Not to mention procedural generation for station interiors and or megaships. Especially because Frontier themselves once mentioned it.
We want to also add leaving ship so you can explore space stations or board enemy vessels or even just look around your own.
But you know, that's all just a hearsay, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, marketing for these updates was a pure mess. We can all agree on that. It was shady, it was misrepresentative, it was industry bullshit, and of course developers seemed confused themselves. But hey, maybe if the updates were good themselves, maybe we can get this fuck you got mine attitude. Right?
Planetech, yes, as said, it's fucking amazing and impressive to see a simple height map generated in 400 billion ways or more. Maybe at first glance it was pretty nifty to see planets. All it is a simple height map. No unique caves, no unique landscape details or tectonic plate movement like on the real moon even. It's all a very simplistic map generation. Granted, it was updated and planets don't look as dead after that, and again with Odyssey adding even more detail, yet it still does very little to make planets, and say it with me, all look the same. But more so, just like the game itself, the one thing that I mentioned in the last part of this video series was there's an apparent lack of things to do. On planets as well. This complaint, to this day, you can hear from people. And really, the only reason why you would go down to a planet is for 3 reasons. Number 1, to see a cool place. Number 2, to take part in a story event or engineer, basically visiting a base. And number 3, to grind materials, which surprisingly often is number 2 as well. But what's more disheartening is that there are mysteries in Elite Dangerous, and now that we could land on planets, well, we could find some of those mysterious places, right? Well, developers certainly themselves mentioned this a lot. Well, sure, you could find these things if you brute fucking force a planet mapping. By which I mean, back in the day, you had no fucking way to find interesting biological, geological, or hidden places on planets except for flying over it in approximately 20-kilometer radius. Then a blip on the radar maybe shows up.
Day 521. I've been flying what seems to be eternity over this planet and haven't found a single interesting thing.
My ship's sensors are as useless as my penis now that I've wanked myself to death every night and cried myself to sleep. But when you have a one-to-one galaxy equivalent as well as planets that span over thousands of square kilometers apart with no counting way to log if you've been over a certain area, how the fuck did developers expect players to find things? Funny that there were some early, hacky, and say it with me, third-party tools made by some smart coders who read direct RAM memory to make mapping tool where you've been on a planet and so on and so forth. What do you think developers did? Basically, they called it a hack and breaking games rules and TOS and whatnot. So any work on such tools was considered a bad no-no thing. And sure, it's warranted in some way. However, at this point in time, everyone wanted proper support for planet stuff and navigation, let alone planet scanning. And the only other way to do the more quote-unquote proper way of finding stuff was breadcrumb logs with precise coordinates sometimes. But not even always that. Some of these mysteries were dead-ended on unknown permit-locked system, so developers deliberately closed off the solution to these mysteries. Genius! And what about those interesting geological and biological places? Just randomly stumble upon them? I tell you, as a creator who wanted to find beautiful and cool places to film to show off how interesting Elite could look in my videos, I remember seeing at most 10 lava spout locations, a few geyser locations logged by others outside of the game. It was demonstrably incompetent in part of developers to have this incredibly massive and wide sandbox, but no fucking way to find the gold nugget. Both level designers and modelers put so much time into, not to mention mysteries they put in. Today, however, oh my fucking god, yes! Yes! But this took almost a year after Horizons ended to be added in the game. I mean, though, it's better late than never, right? Right? And yet still, there are some unlisted points of interest on the plans that you have to manually search for. Unless, of course, there are some mystery logs with some precise coordinates. But maybe that will be changed for Odyssey when it comes out.
Day 945. I've spent almost
3 years looking at this rock. My penis has fallen off and I think I've gone blind in one eye. And I still cannot find that one human signal source that the probulator tells me is on this planet.
Please, somebody kill me!
And more on top, beyond just writing down the coordinates, there is still no way to bookmark a custom location or set a target on the planet's surface. Are you fucking telling us that bookmarking coordinates is too hard? Just genius! Oh, and then we come to engineering, the gameplay that is supposed to incentivize players to go on the planets in the first place. Okay, so I already did a 40-minute dissection of everything engineering. Conclusion to that was, it's very bad. So I do recommend watching that video for in-depth look, as it's very fun and so on and so forth, but the main takeaways are as follows. Engineering in concept offers you to upgrade your ship to an incredible variety, which is amazing. But that comes at the cost of two very bad things. Incredible power creep. Now, if you do anything beyond just watching pixels like a catatonic chimp, you are pretty much forced to get these upgrades. It has become a necessity, whether you like it or not. Even for people who don't engage in any social play, be it PvP, PvE, or solo wanking, you will feel effects of others having ships that fly faster, jump further, and in general ultra butt fucks any leftover semblance of balance. On top, developers have done almost no work in patching, fixing, and more so balancing this feature past its release. It's incredible that a company can give this little shits about a feature that has been clearly proven overpowered and unbalanced for years.
Perfect.
Do you really think that it's okay? How much more arrogant can you be? And because these upgrades are so necessary, you also quickly realize the main truth about Elite Dangerous as a whole.
Muscle grind, muscle grind, muscle grind, muscle grind, muscle grind.
People at launch of the game already complained that Elite was very stretched out and grindy before. Well, it's nothing. It's nothing in comparison to material grinding now. It's so bad that after initial release, developers had to boost material acquisition several times. On top, also introducing workarounds like material traders, but the issue still persists. The game has this chicken and egg issue with grind and upgrades. You grind to get better upgrades, you get better upgrades to grind faster. And it's the endless loop of pointless gameplay that instead should be fun and interesting. In fact, some have realized this already, but grind, the need to continuously repeat the gameplay loop for searching materials or credits as well, to be a live service mandate.
Now, let's talk about grinding in a bit more detail. Well, each person perceives grinding in a bit different manner, which is repeating the same thing over and over again. However, a game designer may enforce its players to repeat these loops multiple times, mostly because they're lazy.
Say you're a designer. Which would you choose? To do your best to make your gameplay varied and unique. Even if it fails at times, at least you can say that you put in effort and time to make it that. Or make a basic go kill a bandit mission and input instead of kill a bandit, your finger slips and you put in kill 100 bandits. Then you realize it's quality gameplay anyways, and it saves you time, so you can move on to another feature that you can half-ass, with this newly found power of putting extra zeros at the end of everything. The reason designers put artificial "you must do this task 7 more times" is that this easily extends the gameplay with very minimal effort.
I'm a designer!
Even if this gameplay loop is interesting, I have this old saying: the worst thing you can do to a good thing is to make it mundane. However, when it comes to material grind in specific, oh boy, imagine taking a shit, then reaching into the toilet bowl and squeezing the turds before flushing. That's material grind. On top, this was the point where I started looking deeper into why we need in the first place to have 5 upgrade ranks for engineering effects, why ships progressively get more expensive, and the answer is player retention. You see, people often forget horrible things they need to go through just to get something good. Our brains are pretty good at trying to justify the shit we do. Again, the sunk cost rears its ugly head.
Now how to increase our player retention in our live service game? Oh, I know, Bob!
Absolute easiest way to make gameplay a true mark of a talentless and hack developer is to plaster your own game with endless grind, till your own employees and presenters need dev cheats for casual streams just to present something in the first place. Horizons opened my eyes on how bare minimum effort can a game become with a simple stroke of an extra zero from a developer that has long since stopped giving a fuck. And this is not to mention how broken, bare bones, imbalanced, and unfair engineering effects are. I'm shocked how careless developers have been over the years, introducing so little changes that it starts to question even if they care about the abomination of a game that it has become due to these unchecked upgrades. To add to this cheap fuckery, in recent times they started releasing double modification modules. So if one upgrade was already like bashing baby seals with a spiked bat, compounding together 2 of them utterly shows the sheer incompetence, knowledge, and respect for your own game. And don't get me wrong, I love a good upgrade, everyone does, but if I wanted to ruin a game with overpowered bullshit and cunting power creep, I would just download a fucking cheat engine. Frankly, in any other normal game company, people responsible for balancing would have been strung up and slapped silly with a wet fish for the crimes against the player base. But in Elite Dangerous, this is business as usual. Now that is engineering. I suppose you can simply summarize it like this.
Hey kids, you want some drugs?
Well, now then, Multicrew is this. Fuck me, 7 whole days by a Catholic church. This one's a mess even today. In theory, Multicrew would offer a co-op style gameplay where people could join your ship or vice versa, making one's empty seats filled with semi-lively and farting hobos. In reality, this feature was released so buggy and underwhelming, some could even claim that it was not released with full set of features. Because the feature was basically built on copy-pasting Wing System, you would not be able to use Wing System with Multicrew. And because SRVs were coded on quite something different altogether, you would not be able to deploy SRVs while the Multicrew was active either. Then, to add an extra insult to injury, you could not even give your Multicrew mates an option to pilot your ship. So basically, if you had someone on board, all you could do is either look at things, shoot turreted weapons, or pilot a ship-launched fighter. That's it. 3 fucking things. But even if somehow you were not bothered by that, if you wanted just some extra money for your friend, well, guess what? Your friend is literally better off using its own ship with normal wings, cause guess what? Multicrew also pays less. And to top off this shit Sunday with Menstruation Cherry, that's if the game would load you incorrectly and not cut the connection mid-gameplay. Cause oh boy, this Multicrew still does not like netcode and glitches out, fails to load or simply does not work at all. What a surprise that only weird people ever bother to click on it by a mistake. So you can only do half of the normal gameplay, the pay is worse, and it's all compounded by the stability that rivals cryptocurrency. Well, what the fuck was the fucking point, you fuck nuggets?
You know, I kind of feel genuine effort coming out of this feature unlike all others. However, it's hampered by either producers rushing it out when it wasn't ready, or coders not having enough code base to work with, either the engine or something, or maybe they just simply lack knowledge in general to make it. Or maybe it was pushed onto the game by the tactical stupidity squad from the marketing. Again. No matter what it was, one thing was already creeping on, and its name, Tech Debt. Maybe this was the update that caused all the seasons to merge, cause to this day developers avoid using Multicrew, talking about it, and worst of all, fixing it.
It's like that redhead stepchild that's not even good for spare organs and brings down the whole family with chlamydia and syphilis and AIDS. And in comparison, at least the CQC only had the telltale signs of Black Plague. After some updates and getting to be a real content creator for a living thanks to my coverage of Elite Dangerous back during the Horizons period, I started to notice something, a trend that in retrospect of Horizons Season Pass I can confirm. The development of Elite Dangerous slowed down a lot. With the last update in Horizons called The Return, where we finally got to see some Targoids and even fight them, I noticed there was very little content otherwise being changed or added in. Looking back to some other updates, my fears were confirmed. The further we got into Horizons, the less was given to us. Now, while it is natural for games to slow down with updates and size of them after a while, for the last update of Horizons to basically be some story-related crap and rather minimal amount of changes, it all felt like, well, someone was phoning in their performance, despite the Targoid boss battle being very nice addition. And this is where I started to think more critically about Horizons, a 2-year season pass, an update every 6 months or so, like a ticking clock. But were we promised anything like this? Did we get our money's worth? And then it dawned on me, what if we had forced Frontier to properly and fairly disclose what they are willing to make before we decide to spend our money on their vision, not just hope that whatever they deliver ends up being worth it in retrospect. It really was a scummy move for Frontier to first and foremost do a pre-order update season scheme, and best of all, phone it in at the end with a pathetic wimp of a fart. Would we really spend our hard-earned money on Horizons knowing how broken Multicrew would be, how little there would be to do on planets? Well, probably, because like in a typical pay-to-win game, upgrades speak loudest, and the broken engineering would force anyone who wanted to accomplish anything in Elite to buy into this mess. Now, I do have some sympathy for the developers and even the company when it comes to Horizons. It was the dipshit's fault who suggested to go live service, with a game that now we ended up with rushed and sometimes even more pathetic results as updates. It's so bad that they merged the planned quote-unquote seasons and we would not see any other ever again. It was also the fault of the marketing department for misleading and falsely advertising the whole thing. So yes, I kinda feel sorry for the coders who had to execute the bad ideas coming from designers, and designers being forced to think up new ways to implement these eye-catching but ultimately vapid or game-breaking marketing slogans. Maybe it was the fault of David, the CEO, who didn't keep his quote-unquote baby on a tighter leash, though he was and still is an industry outsider, so probably didn't know better when to slap some heads for very bad ideas.
Now what I know is what the public knows, and through the 2 years of Horizons, the modus operandi of Frontier was very, very clear to us.
Instead of going back and redoing a feature or adjusting it for other parts of the game, we keep on moving forward. For every case of broken features or underperforming tools, let's just keep on moving forward. For every time there was a need to bring in some quality of life, let's just move on forward. Sure, I exaggerate, as engineering got a facelift, Planet Tech got a facelift, fuck, even the Crime and Punishment got a facelift. However, I question the intent and result of each. But not only game-making principles of Elite have been simple, onwards must make more pointless content for sheep to consume, but the company's attitude towards Elite's community was also very similarly single-minded. Stay quiet, never engage in adequate manner, nor tell them anything. Just keep on doing streams like
Smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
It's funny, you could even be forgiven if you said, well, all Frontier does is shit out the content every 6 months or so and then fucks off to eat your money, then repeat. And frankly, that's quite an apt description even today. I've said this numerous times, but it bears repeating. Quality of life updates from time to time would have been just as, if not more popular than the next big Targoid fart, or what have you, but like a mule, they just keep on pumping out content, and thus we end up with rushed and half-finished features that keep on piling onto this mess of a strung-along game where you can't tell heads or tails anymore.
Now, it's rather hard to put it in short soundbites so that an average American with its low attention span will understand it, but I'll try.
Horizon Season Pass, while not criticized as harshly as I'm doing it today, perhaps really should have been. Still, for all its faults, it did impact the game in a multiple major ways. It all generated a lot of excitement and interest, and it cannot be denied. Planet landings were quite literally reshaping the galaxy, both on gameplay and on technical side. I'm still incredibly impressed how well Elite's universe works and is made. Engineering then furthered uniqueness of ships, making this one of the most customizable vehicle games I know. And the story being in more realistic universe space, on brink of human galactic expansion, making the first contact with this very real and very angry murder flower also kinda got me interested. However, the small cracks that every new and fresh game has with these additions and time to analyze became clearer, wider and longer. People slowly woke up to what Elite was, like after a night of heavy drinking and hitting on girls. It was a game not with a major issue of having a bit too much grind and a bit too wide sandbox. It was clear that it was not a mistake. The grind was there on purpose. Developers intentionally crafted it. And what may have seemed like overwhelmed coders unable to keep up with the bugs and balance of the game became almost like a mandate that the only things they would go back to would be things that let players skip the grind or crash the game. Everything else could fuck off. Moreover, we as customers were treated like children, only told things when it was of the utmost importance and to keep the noise down. Horizons was a fucking loot box of an expansion with no accountability and dubious results. What saddens me the most is the overall attitude. You can fuck up a season pass, you can fuck up an update. Hell, you can fuck up every single update like it's your passion, but when it's time to shit or get off the pot to make things better, it's ignored because we need to... And what the fuck do we need to do? Well, I would normally say that they kept on moving forward to deliver more content for the content's sake, like what they did with Horizons. But once it was done, well, that's not exactly what happened in the short term. Well, if short term is the next 2 years. Though, ultimately, it was exactly that. The next 2 years would spell out exactly where the priorities and principles and focus of this British company lied. The next 2 years of drought. But for now, that's pretty much it. These massive dissections could not be possible without my amazing support over at Patreon, YouTube members and Twitch supporters, so if you too want to support these mega videos, like these awesome peeps, check out the Patreon and other useful links down in the description. But that aside, for the next part we'll be looking a bit deeper into what happened with the great content drought that was beyond and the subsequent semi-maintenance phase before Odyssey.